Hey, my friends. Today I am so excited to introduce you to Amanda Vandersteen. I got the pleasure and the honor of interviewing her. She's someone who came across Blushing Phoenix about 3 years ago before she went on her own healing journey from erythrophobia. And it was through connecting to her inner self and the inner healing and some energetic type things, such as somatics and tapping, that she was able to realize some of the similarities between her inner healing and how erythrophobia, the fear of blushing, was connected to so many of these like inner wounds, people pleasing, and how she was showing up in the world, so overly focused on herself and how she was showing up as opposed to just being. So I had the greatest honor and pleasure of interviewing her on the channel so that you could hear her story. And I'm excited for you to hear what she has to share with you. Always our intent at Blushing Phoenix is for you to hear these stories to know you are not alone. You are not alone. And there is hope for your situation, that there is possibility for you. It is possible to overcome erythrophobia, the fear of turning red, chronic blushing, and the things that make you feel held back through social hindrances. We talk a lot about containing yourself in a cage and how blushing correlates with being restricted and pulling your energy inward. And we spend some time with Amanda to talk about how we can move into our healing by letting our energy back out into the world. So let me share a little bit about Amanda. Amanda is a creative soul who has overcome the worst of her erythrophobia, a journey that began in her early years, but has now led her to a newfound sense of freedom. Through a transformative path of inner healing, Amanda has begun to embrace her true self and is now passionate about empowering herself and others to build a purposeful, creative, and abundant life. Her love for creativity shines through in her digital designs, paintings, and writing. When she's not immersed in her artistic pursuits, you can find her at the beach, Pilates, traveling, or enjoying moments with friends, family, and her much-loved puppy, Leah. Without further ado, welcome Amanda to Blushing Phoenix. I posted something on Instagram. It was like that video of me dancing around singing. And then you
Yes.
shared a little bit about your experience of overcoming erythrophobia. And it's an honor to have you on Blushing Phoenix today to talk a little more about your experience. So we're going to start and jump right into the questions. And
hmm
I just want to ask you to share a little bit about your experience with erythrophobia, and when you first started struggling with it, or when you first started realizing that you were struggling with that.
Right. Thanks, April. Thanks for having me. Um, I was thinking about this. It's really hard to pinpoint an exact time that it really started. I do remember like way back in primary school. I don't know how that if that equivalates with in America, but in Australia, primary school is sort of around like up to 12 years old. So I vaguely remember like someone pointing out that I blushed then. But it wasn't like a problem for me. I think it was probably when I was about 13 or 14, like maybe a year into high school, because I remember the first year of high school, like I was pretty confident, like I didn't really have any fear of talking to boys or people or anything like that. But I just distinctly remember like this like breaking point where it became a thing and where like people, I think people must have started pointing it out to me, or became very aware of blushing. And so then I think from there, like my whole high school, I can just remember having that fear of like of blushing. And so like I would avoid everything to not for that not to happen. Um, but yeah, very much around probably like 14, 15, it like became a really big thing and really affected the rest of my life. But high school was horrible, I think. Probably the worst part for me.
Did you think that, because I noticed for myself, even when I look back at some old pictures when I was younger, because mine didn't happen in like elementary school, or if it did, I didn't know it. It wasn't until I was an adult and somebody pointed it out. But I look back at pictures of me in like high school and in my early 20s, and there sometimes I could see like there was a little bit of a flushing on me in some of those pictures, but nobody ever said anything, and I just didn't care. But when it
That's good,
did
yeah.
really get brought to my attention, it became such a self-aware thing, almost to the point of like self-consciousness because I was so aware. And so was that kind of like the thing for you to feel like almost like obsessing over the blushing made you blush?
Yeah, it made it so much worse. I think because I knew that people knew that I go red, it made every situation worse because I would then in my brain think, oh no, like if they're gonna think I'm gonna go red, like if I go red, they're gonna think this. And like just around boys especially, I think for me was like a big thing because like I'd be like, oh, they're gonna think I like them if I go red. And so like in that moment, I'd be like trying not to or avoid those situations. And especially in class, I think because everyone knew and you're in the same class all the time. Like, and also I was quite smart when I was younger. Like, well, I'm still smart, but when I was younger, I used to like excel grades all the time. Like, I always came first in class. And so, like, everyone would be like, oh, like, I knew that I was going to get, like, the teacher was going to say, well done, blah, blah, blah. And so, like, it was so many things that I just had to, like, I knew that people would be, like, expecting that. And so, yeah, it made it all the much worse.
Was it being like the center of attention, or are there things that you like to do that make you the center of attention that made you start kind of shying back from any of those things so you wouldn't have that attention on you?
Well, I used to be in the band like when I first started high school. I remember quitting that, but I don't know if it was because I was worried about being embarrassed, but so my grades definitely went down over high school because I hated being called out in class. I hated being told, like, even though like deep inside me, I loved winning. I loved being good at what I like my work. I think that digressed just because I didn't want to be the center of attention. I think looking back in retrospect, it was definitely not wanting to be seen, like not wanting everyone to look at me.
How did you
So yeah.
handle when people, did you have people call it out often, or when they did call it out, how did you actually handle that moment? Did you run away? Did you respond to it? What was your response to those things?
I think the hardest part of that, and probably why it was even worse, is I felt trapped, like because in a class and being someone that was like a bit of a people pleaser, I never felt like I could just leave. And so I feel like in those moments, it would always be my closest friends that said something. I don't think anyone else, like people might have looked at me, but it could have been in my head as well. But my friends would always go, "You're going really red." Um, and I'd just be like, oh my gosh. Like, and then like in those moments, I guess I would just get really in my head. And all I can remember, like, because, obviously it happened as I got older, I would blank out, like, because I was so trying to focus on my body and to stop it, it just got worse. And so I kind of just had to, like, ride it out. I just had to, like, feel like, it would be really bad because even after going red, my face would go, like, really, really red. And then my whole body would just feel shocked, like, having to go through that feeling of until you just feel okay to be in the now and what's going on with the classroom again. So it was quite, yeah, like I don't know if I really dealt with it well. I just had to go through it.
Yeah, but you stayed in it. Have there been moments where you could get away, and if you felt yourself turning red, would you escape?
Yeah, if I could without it feeling too awkward, I would. Like I'd be oh, I've just yeah, like oh no, pretend I'm doing something or like if I was like at work or something, I would just like pretend I'm doing something or have to get up and go to the toilet or yeah, like I would definitely escape so they like no one would see it.
Right. And it kind of
But
gives that time
yeah.
out too. That's something that I did too back in the day was if I could get away and it wasn't awkward, is to just give myself a moment to try to get my nervous system to calm down. But it was through
Yeah.
staying in the situation that I had a recent situation where I was at dinner with someone, and I think it was just like a long week and I was tired and I was sitting at dinner with her and I could feel that I was getting red at dinner. And now for me, it's interesting because I like to observe it. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
let me take this in and see what this experience is like for me
Yeah.
so that I can talk about it. But it's interesting, like you said, kind of what happens to the body because the body almost like checks out. Like you almost check out while you're going through that
Yeah.
state to try to stay very aware now, if and when it does happen to me. I just try to stay very aware to try to see like, ooh, what's happening and like how's my breathing and what's happening internally. I try to
Yeah.
see if there's an external thing that might have triggered it, but if I don't see anything externally, then I'm like, okay, maybe I'm tired or whatever, and just try to follow
Yeah.
it. So when you got into your place of feeling, or were you at a place where you were feeling limited by blushing or that you were holding yourself back from things because of blushing? And then is that what kind of pushed you into the journey of I want to tap into some new things for my healing? Was tell a little bit about how that went for you, like from the hindrance of it and the insecurity of it to the moment where you wanted to do something about it.
Yeah, I feel for me, like I always distinctly could like visualize it as being stuck in a cage. I always felt like I really like I couldn't explain why, but I felt like really like the real self, the real Amanda was stuck in a cage and I couldn't really be myself completely in an environment. Like with friends, yes, but just out in the normal world, like at work or anywhere else, I felt like very limited in just saying, just speaking. I think a lot of people thought I was really quiet. And like I think I'm on the quiet side, but at home I'm not. Like I just speak my mind. I ramble. I have a lot of things to say. And I never felt like I could really do that. Like I would overthink things. I'm like, oh no, like I'm not really sure what to say, so I won't say anything just in case I embarrass myself or I'm awkward. There's many times where I wanted to change it. It's just I got to a point where like I was stuck again. Like when I went into a specific work environment, I was stuck. Like I couldn't move anywhere. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore.
Do you think that I heard you mention people pleasing earlier? Has
Yeah.
it been your experience at all? Just from my own experience, I think part of what led to me having the overactive nervous system and some dysregulation was I also was an extreme people pleaser, and a lot of that came
Yeah.
from just kind of scaling the environment for the authority and making sure that I was
Yeah.
on the good side of the authority. And therefore, I hated
Mm.
confrontation. I hated for people to even productively disagree with me, made me feel like I'm wrong, not what I said they were disagreeing with, but that they disagree with me as a human, as a being. And it's just something so deep
Yeah.
rooted that I found that if I could navigate my environments and my people in the environments to stay safe, it really it's what contributed to what I said and how I acted. And even in interactions with people, like, was I smiling enough? Was I nodding enough? Was
Yeah.
I like engaging with them enough so that they know that I'm actually there for you? Talk a little bit about how the people pleasing might have played into this for you.
Yeah. I think looking back in hindsight, it was 100% like caring what people think. I guess like I always overanalyze the situation before I even was in it anyway. So if something doesn't, then it's like if something doesn't play out the way that you think it's going to play out, then then you're stuck in that moment and that's when it gets awkward. But yeah, definitely very deep rooted, like you said. I think, you would think about every single thing that you said and how someone reacted. Like I was hypersensitive of how someone reacted, even like when I'm speaking maybe not so much now, I would very much look at their reactions. And so if they started looking bored or looked away or I don't know, then I would take that in and think, oh, like I literally would just stop talking sometimes or lose what I'm saying. And then like because I was so focused on how other people were reacting.
Yeah, it's like a
So
hyper vigilance on them, on you, instead of just being
yeah,
present, instead of just being present, like
yeah,
in the moment. That's what I realized with myself over the past year was that it's good to have self-awareness, but
yeah,
when the pendulum has switched so far to the other side, it's swung so far to the other side, you're almost self-consumed in your hypervigilance of how I am in the environment, how I look in the environment, how I'm reacting in the environment, and then also how the people around me are, and those social cues, facial cues, body language. To me, I would interpret as a message of something I said or that somebody's done talking to me.
yeah,
So it's interesting to hear that because I've talked to many people who've had blushing in their experience, whether they've struggled deeply with it or not, but a lot of it has come from just that hypervigilance and
mm,
sensitivity to what's happening around you. So, in your experience of getting to that place of like your kind of breaking point, I love that you said it's like being in a cage because I
yeah,
think so many people who are listening can relate to that, whether they blush or they don't blush. This is one thing I always talk to people um, when they're so stunned by erythrophobia. I didn't even know that was a thing. You know, I've noticed people turn red, but I
yeah,
didn't know it was such a big thing. I'm like, even for people or my coaching clients who I talk to that are like, it's this big scary thing that so many people actually feel that whatever their insecurity is their cage. So I love that you said it's a cage, because in if it's a cage, then that means there's some way to get out, that we're actually
Yeah.
inside of something and we can come out of it. So what was your I'm getting out of this cage moment, and what was that moment for you? And then what did you do to start exploring, or were you exploring some other sort of like energetic type things, and then you found yourself kind of coming out of your erythrophobia?
I think it was about 2019. I sort of started, like, I'd just come out of a breakup, so I'd started going into like the spiritual sort of learning before I kind of chose to go down, like, do something about the blushing. And I feel like it's hard to say, but I feel like it was all part of it, because you know, in that journey you start to like really like realize that you're worthy of everything that you want. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, because I was kind of in a very apathetic place where I had just given up. I'm just like, didn't feel really believe that I could have anything that I really wanted in life. And this is who I was. And I just had to keep working at it. So I think when I started to believe that, like, I can literally create my reality, I can have it the way I want it to have it, that was an inner belief that came into me first. But it wasn't long after that I had to start working full time. And to be honest, I hadn't ever really worked full time a lot in my life. I've done a lot of part time and random little jobs. And it was in a place where I was like, it was a call center. So I was stuck in at a desk and I couldn't really get up except for like breaks. And my team leader was a guy that I felt like that I was like quite attracted to. And so at first it wasn't a problem. And then, like, I think when I became to notice that, and then, like, so when he could just come up, like, for me in that moment I was stuck, and I'm like, oh my gosh, don't, like, I noticed my body starting to go red again, and like me trying to like stifle that in and just act normal. And it wasn't just that anyone of authority really, but it must have, I just realized in that moment, it must be that stuck feeling, that feeling where I can't just get up and like leave that
Mhm.
situation. And it all just became a big thing again. And so at that point, I'm like, I need to find a solution to this. I can't live like this. I just want to be able to be myself. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of how my journey was too. I was looking for like tactical solutions and what could actually be done about it. And then it was more that I went on that spiritual journey.
Mm,
And I started to realize like there's so much nuance to this. And that's why I'm really protective of anybody who says like I can cure your blushing. And I'm like, it doesn't
mm,
work that way. It's so
yeah.
many layers of it. And I think that's why it's so important to tell people and have people understand that they do have the power. They do have the ability to change their mind, to reframe their thoughts, to
Yeah.
accept and love themselves in this state. And then it seems like the side effect of that is that the blushing either significantly reduces, or for some people goes away, or they just understand that that's just a part of them being a human. And so
Yeah.
it's uh Colin Clem is somebody that I interviewed on the channel. He had gone viral a few times on TikTok talking about erythrophobia, and he and I connected, and he said, it's very specific. It's very specific to being a human, just as if you
Mm,
sweat or you cough or you sneeze, like turning red.
yeah.
But getting into a state of fight or flight where your body's constantly doing it is a dysregulated
Yeah.
nervous system, which is what I found. And then we reinforce that redness because we are so fearful and unaccepting of the redness. So, in your journey, when you started to explore some of the spiritual stuff, did you have like a moment where you just stopped turning red, where you started thinking differently? Like, tell a little bit about like your journey and when you started to notice either were you focused on making yourself stop turning red, or were you just in a situation one day where you were like, whoa, I would have normally turned red there. What was that like for you?
Yeah, and it's very much what you're saying. And then I can, yeah, you would understand that you just want a solution. You just want it to suddenly, like, the next day, stop. And I wanted that so bad for so long, but I guess it didn't really happen like that. It was a very, like, just one day I was like, oh, it's not really happening for me anymore. But I think for me, like, the tapping, like, I think I told you about this, like, yeah, like, I did tapping first, and I did a bit of somatic therapy to focus on those sort of things. And I think those help. But I also like at the time, like not to endorse anything, but I was taking St. John's Wort like at the time because I felt like that was a very just like it just took the edge off a little bit in situations. And at that time, I think it helped me get through. But I don't think that solved anything. It was just helpful at the time. Um, and so I feel like just to go to the point where like I suddenly realized like it wasn't happening anymore, it was probably a few months after doing somatic therapy and the tapping, and it was a different job that I was at. I just remember feeling like just looking back over the last couple of weeks or months and going, oh, I haven't gone red at all. Actually, I haven't even really thought about it. Like, so I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, I've got goose like bumps right now just because it's like it's so liberating to go that wasn't even on your brain, like when that used to consume your thoughts all the time. And I think for me, the biggest thing is like, I can just be in the now. And, for example, like someone comes into the office, that used to be a trigger for me. Like, oh, who is it going to be? Oh my goodness, like brace yourself. Now I don't really think about it. And I can more just like see who it is and like wait for them to talk and then go with the flow. And that's pretty cool.
I think that that's a key point of what you just said is to when you got to the point where you realized you weren't even like thinking about it and it was something that was so consuming at one point. And this is where I drew a correlation between when I used to struggle with panic attacks back in 2011. I was in a constant panic attack. I would come out of a panic attack, regulate a little bit, and then go straight back into a panic attack. And I started to reframe in the way of I was going to do it afraid. I was going to show up. I remember I just wanted to, I've always ran and I just wanted to run, but I was so scared
Mm.
to run at this park because when you got into like the deeper part of the park, it was away from the parking lot and the people. And I would start to have a panic attack back there, just this irrational fear that I was going to drop dead on the track and no one would ever find me. And I remember the day that I went out there and I was like staring at it from the distance. And I just remember saying to myself, like, well, I'm going to die trying. Like, I would rather die running than die
Yeah.
in a panic attack that I'm sitting in my house alone. It was like that cage that you were talking about. And I remember running it the first time, and it was hard as hell. Like, my heart was
Yeah.
beating fast. I felt like I was going to black out. I felt like I had come too far. I should turn around. Like, all the fear was there. But then when I made it to the other side, it was awful and hard. There was nothing easy about it. But I didn't
Yeah.
realize in that moment that I was chipping away at this bondage and this cage that was locking me in by showing up. And then maybe like a couple of days later, I didn't do it again because it was so terrifying. But then I went and I did it again. And then
Yeah.
I did it again to where eventually my brain understood this is not a danger anymore because
Yeah.
my body's going to go there anyway. And
Yeah.
then I was breaking the cycle. And then I started going to work. And I remember every day I would drive to work and I was so afraid. I had to stay in like the lane that's, well, in America, the lane that's closest to the shoulder. And like, I just was so scared. And then
Yeah.
a few weeks in, I remember I was halfway to work and I thought, I'm not thinking about having a panic attack. And then it was funny because I like basically gave myself anxiety
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
remembered that I'm supposed
Yeah.
to have anxiety. And
Yeah.
um and then it was like I was just so distracted and so involved in my life and so in the now that before I knew it, days had passed and I hadn't had a panic attack. And then days and days and days had passed and I hadn't had a panic attack. And then when I wrote my book, Pressing Forward, I actually wanted to have a panic attack because I wanted to document what it was like. And I felt one coming on one day and I pulled over and got out my journal to write down, okay, we're going to document this like a journalist. And because I was inviting it to come there, I've never had a panic attack since. And that was like
Yeah.
2012. I've never, ever, ever in my life had a panic attack since. And so I realized with blushing that it kind of follows that same
Yeah.
route, that the more I fear it, the more I reinforce it and give it this like boogeyman, scary thing that is going to put me in a cage. But if I can put myself in a cage, I can also release myself
Yeah.
from the cage. So I love the tapping and the somatic healing and the energetic healing um, journey because for me, and even as Blushing Phoenix shifts from just talking about blushing to actually connecting more with like-minded spiritual people, because I think
Yeah.
that for a lot of people that I've met that I feel are part of the Blushing Phoenix community, they're very sensitive and spiritual, intuitive people.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like so much of where they've gotten off in being chronically red is because they're kind of living in that cage, but they're living in a way that isn't in alignment with who they are.
Mm.
And their body is just saying, like, let me out, like, let
Yeah.
me be free, let me do the things that we want to do that you've somehow quieted or people have quieted. So when it goes into tapping, because maybe a lot of people just aren't familiar with what tapping is. I've had a little bit of experience with it, but not a lot.
Yeah.
Um, can you share a little bit about just the tapping and the somatics, energetic healing, just from your perspective, whether it had to do with blushing or not, but how you think that might have correlated back to some of your healing?
I might not explain it the best, but essentially I think it's like a be about like allowing the body to like change a belief in your mind. Like so like they get you to a point of like feeling a feeling and then touching the points in your body. I'm not sure what it does. It just obviously gets the nervous system in a place where it can then come back down again. So like if you're, and I guess that's what from what you're saying, like when you actually experience a feeling and go through it, then your body kind of like chips away at it. And so I feel like tapping, like, you kind of they put a thought like and that makes you feel something and then they put a new like override that and program it with a new belief and make your body feel that safe in that and believe that. I think I'm probably not explaining it very well,
Yeah, I think
but
it's kind of like an interrupter, right? Like the tapping is an
yeah.
interrupter to like that neurological thing that's happening. I've had so this is how I am with a lot of spiritual stuff. I don't know how to re-explain it to people, but I know how to
Yeah,
experience it.
exactly. Yeah. I'm just like,
So,
yeah, no, it works really well. Just go do
yeah. So for
it.
anybody who's logical, I'm never their cup of tea because I'm like, I don't know, I can just tell you what it was like. But I think I'm not super familiar with it either, but I do think that it has something to do with like interrupting a pattern by
Yeah.
doing the tapping. It's something neurological that happens. So I think you're explaining it right. We might be the blind
Yeah.
leading the blind, but we know it works.
Yeah. I'm like, I know, but yeah, explaining it's really But I was thinking when you were speaking, especially with the somatic, that's just this one thing that she said that really stuck with me, and I think it really like explains or like what the like real deep root of it all is. Because I remembered her just like going like I was talking about The Office and how sometimes like when people get too close in my space bubble, that's when I start feeling awkward and going, oh my gosh, like they're really close. If I go red, they're gonna think I'm weird. Uh, I remember her going like in those moments, like, how do you feel? And then it always came back to me feeling retracted. So like all of me was inside of me. And then that like I can think back now and go, okay, that makes sense because I'm afraid to put my energy out there. I'm afraid to like be like put myself out there and my energy out there. And so she kind of in those moments made me like just imagine the situation and then just like imagine feeling my energy going out. And I think that's like that moment, and I'm sure there's a lot of other things that like could contributed, but for me, practicing that helped me feel more safe in just like being in those moments, I think, because I think somehow when the body retracts, that's when you're like too much focused on yourself and what how other people are.
Wow. Oh my
Um,
gosh. Oh my gosh. Hold on. I have to stop you for a second because
yeah.
that just, okay. So all of me is inside of me. And when I think about, you were saying that, and I just felt like covered in chills because I always live in a way of like, am I being expansive right now or am I collapsing into myself? And I've
Yeah.
never thought about when I am in a place where I start to flush or blush all of me is inside of me. I pulled myself away for some reason.
Mm,
And
yeah.
maybe that could be because I'm tired or because I don't
Yeah.
intuitively trust something that's happening around me. Or I'm questioning something. And I think that's a lot for a lot of people. It goes back to your cage
Mm.
analogy about all of me is inside of me. That is, I think that, I mean, if nobody else gets anything out of that, that I'm pretty sure just liberated me in a way of one thing I ask myself a lot is what am I believing in this moment that's making me feel this way? And this is almost like a reframing of like all of my energy, all of me, all the essence of me. I've kind of shoved it inside to hide it and
Mm,
keep it close. And anyway, thank you for sharing that. I think that was huge. Sorry, I
that's
didn't mean to
okay.
interrupt you.
No, but that's so true though. I think like and like how it relates to blushing because like I think I always used to not really like hearing this because I'm like, I don't want to have to do this. I don't want to have to do it the hard way, is actually just letting it happen
Mm.
and like trying to feel safe and just let your body do it. Like, because I think very much like you like trying to stop it is like that's what I kept hearing from things that I was listening to is like stopping it makes it worse. But the idea of actually like letting it happen is really scary because, you know, you're like, okay, but I'm going to go red and then people are going to look at me weird and I still have to experience all that. But it really is the same thing, isn't it? Like to feel safe in letting yourself out. So,
Oh, and that goes, it really goes back to what I was saying about when I would run, when I knew I got around that corner, was I could die there and no one would ever find my body, which was an irrational thought, but it was so scary to me. But it wasn't until I actually ran it a few times and realized like I may die there. Same with blushing. Everybody in the room may laugh at me. Another soul may never talk to me ever again. I think when we really chase down like what is the thing that we're fearing the most,
yeah,
and that's why I always say the blushing is an invitation because I know on my own journey, I didn't love it when I discovered it that I'm like, oh, the only way out is through. And so
yeah,
then I knew from just a blushing phoenix perspective of talking to other people that it helped me kind of identify who my people were because it would be the people who were willing to go through it. And that's not everybody. And I get that it's hard.
yeah.
But even connecting with you because part of what you were sharing with me is that you were able to go through it. You were able to show up. And do you still blush now?
Every now and then, like I think back to the last month, like I can remember like maybe one time where like I can't even remember the situation where I felt like I was getting a little like I could feel a little bit of heat, but it wasn't to the same extent as what I used to. Because I think in that moment I didn't really care. Like it wasn't, I was still, and when I like I was in the moment and could just like I kind of like felt my body a little bit go like to retract in the old pattern, and then I just kind of went, oh no, I'm fine. Like I think my body can handle it better now. I think my nervous system is stronger. So in those moments, it just handles those moments better and my body doesn't keep going down whatever rabbit hole it normally goes and I can come back really quickly.
Do you think it has
So
to do with a sense of like acceptance also that you've already
yeah.
kind of accepted and regulated what this is? And so you don't, your brain is kind of understanding it doesn't need to obsess over this thing or freak out or create scenarios. Do you think maybe that might be what happened for you?
I'm at the moment, I'm very much in a part of my life where like I don't care as much about what people think. I'm very like more liberated in what I want and like, pushing forward and doing like following that path. So I think in that, yeah, I don't worry as much what people are thinking because it's just a blip in a time. Like
Mm.
I think like because like I think manifesting is a whole nother thing, but I'm very much into that at the moment and manifesting things that I want. So like I feel like when a moment happens, it doesn't really matter as much anymore because past doesn't matter. I can just keep going forward and creating the things I want to. So
I love
in
that outlook.
situations.
I love that.
Yeah.
And that's how I think for me, it was spending a lot of time alone and starting to visualize how I wanted to show up. I remember when I first moved to South Carolina, where I'm at now, I would go sit in my closet and I was really, really into Dr. Joe Dispenza. He's one of my favorites. I
That's
love
so funny. Sorry to interrupt that. Like when you, I like that was like one thing I was thinking of. Who are my role models? But yeah, him for
Dr. Joe
sure.
Dispenza. I've listened to him before multiple times in the past, but it wasn't until I moved to South Carolina because energetically I felt like we needed to leave the land that we lived in. I wasn't born there in Tennessee, but I had lived there since I was 4. It's just where all of my like makeup for who I am was created, and then also breaking out of who that person is. And then coming to South Carolina, the whole goal was to be able to explore who am I now and what do I still want to work on, and who is the girl that was in Tennessee that served me back then, but we need to leave her there. And it was through listening to Dr. Joe Dispenza that I was listening to some of the things that he was saying about really visualizing how you want to show up. And I was thinking about work meetings I was going to have to go to, and I would visualize how I looked, how I felt, how I was breathing, that I wasn't turning red in those situations. And if I did turn red, because that is a human response, if I'm a little more
Yeah.
sensitive to that and I do turn red, that I wasn't going to base my accomplishment on whether I turned red or not. It was going to be, did I speak what I wanted to say? Did
Yeah.
I become aware of other people in the room and be able to follow conversations accordingly without protecting myself because there was nothing to fear?
Yeah.
And I've seen significant changes because of visualization. And I'm really into manifesting. There's many like small stories I could tell about things that usually come through visualization that have gotten me outcomes. But it's through inner work. It was all through
Yeah.
inner work. And I feel like even in that inner work, I've been able to meet that blushing phoenix, that blushing side of me that really was just an invitation and giving a voice to something in my body that specifically for me, because mine was chest and neck more so than face. Are you more face or chest and neck, or is it all over?
Mostly face, but it does happen on my chest as well. Just kind of, yeah, if it's really bad, like, though it's funny, like, I think that it depends. Yeah, sometimes it can just happen on the chest, but then, like, yeah, generally, like, the face.
Yeah. So mine would start on my like chest and neck, which I found really interesting with the throat chakra and how long I just kept my voice silent, afraid to
Yeah.
talk. But if it's really, really bad, mine goes up my face and up my ears. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's some days where I'm almost like, am I having an allergic reaction to something because it's like itchy and it's hot and
Yep.
it's more than just like a trigger of like anxiousness or something that happened around me. And that to me has been getting to know it, but also
Yeah.
through a self-acceptance thing as well. And that truly, I don't know if this has been your experience, but from my experience, nobody cares. They really
No.
don't care.
No, not really. Like, I remember some people going, "Are you okay?" Like in those really bad, like, bad ones that happen. But
Right.
yeah, no, it's so hard to believe that, Lou. Like when people always say, no one really cares. You're like, but when you care about what people think, you just think that they do. But you're right, no one really
Yeah.
does.
No one really cares that much as you're caring about it for yourself. And like you said, some people might care because they actually are truly concerned.
Yeah.
I had an incident, I don't know if I think I posted this on Instagram, but I had an instance where the dental hygienist said something to me because I got flushed at the dentist's office the other day. That would normally trigger me and spiral me out. And it's just so normal for me to speak to it if I need to and educate briefly. I've learned my elevator pitch. Have you had moments, or I know you said you're not blushing as much, but if you do blush or you've had a moment where somebody did say something like, "Are you okay?" Have you had an instance where you've had to respond now that you've kind of moved through your erythrophobia, where you just address it and speak to it, or has that just not happened anymore?
It hasn't happened to the point where I'd feel confident. Like I reckon now if it happened and someone asked, I could be confident to say, yeah, like this is what it is. But in the past when it used to happen, I used to pretend. But like I remember like when you were talking, I remembered this moment at a wedding and I didn't have makeup on and that because that's like my skin. And I don't know what happened, but something triggered me and I started blushing and they're like, my friends were like, "Are you okay?" Like, and then like I just pretend like they're like, "Are you sure you need some water or something?" So I just pretended like I was feeling faint and like, and I just they're like, "You might need to go out and get some air." I'm like, "Okay," like I'll go out and get some air. So like it was very much just a show, like I just pretended. But I think now I'd be pretty confident just to explain, "Oh yeah, my body just does that."
I think that people, as long as they know you're okay, that they're okay too. I did want to
Yeah.
ask you, you touched on it briefly about St. John's Wart. Um, I actually am
Yes.
interested in you sharing a little bit about that because I talk about propranolol a lot on the channel. I don't use it anymore. It's funny, I actually have it sitting in front of me because I found it the other day and I was considering taking it at like if I go to like a social event and then like recording and documenting what it was like, but I also just don't need it. But it
Yeah.
was helpful for me, I think, for a lot of people who are just on the path and they hear us talking and they're like, oh, that's awful to think about just sitting through it, or to my analogy of running back away from the parking lot and feeling like I can't run back there. But if they're considering it, I think people who are even considering maybe I could, they will. But
Yeah.
sometimes they need a little something just to get them to that point to help bridge the gap. And for me, propranolol really helped silence my obsessive thoughts when I would take it.
Yeah.
There was a couple times I still flushed on propranolol, but I just absolutely did not care. And so because I
Yeah.
didn't obsess over it, it made the heat subside and the flushing subsided. So for you, what is St. John's Wort? I've heard about it before, but I've never taken it and nobody's ever recommended it. So what is it, and how did that help you?
Again, I might not explain it very well, but it's sort of like a natural substitute to like antidepressants. So I used to be on them when I was younger, and I found at the time those really helped me, but I realized in the end they were just a band-aid and not the solution. But it's sort of like it's a natural, very like it just helps you from on a low level. So it does help, I think, on a low level with depression, but also anxiety. And so you can just get it from the chemist. I know in Australia you can just get it from the chemist. And um, for me, it's a similar thing. It just sort of took the edge off like my nervous system, and my nervous system felt a little bit more like safe in the environment. And even if there was a little bit of placebo to it, I felt like I was taking something that would help me. And but I do think it really helped my nervous system in the moment, and I didn't care as much when the situations happened, because I definitely still blushed in those on it. But I think it helped me handle the situation better.
That's how I feel, even with it, if with it being, if it is a placebo, any sort of herbal remedies. I had a tea that I was testing out at one point that I truly felt that it was helping just to calm my nervous system just a little bit to help support me and get me through it. And I don't think people understand that even if you are using something that's a band-aid, that
Yeah.
sometimes that will help you get to the next place. Because
Yeah.
even for me with propranolol, I was happy to have found it, but also I'm like, I don't want to be dependent upon a medication to be able to show up and be
Yeah.
myself. I just, that was not the answer for me. And so it was fantastic in bridging the gap, but it also was not my solution, because there was really, I think what I figured out at the end of the day was I'm not a problem to solve. There's a lot of healing and a lot of things I think we can tap into on an energetic level. So much mystery and wonder and exciting things that, especially if you're an intuitive person who's deeply connected, I think what you might find is that you might be caged because you're living by the way the world wants you to live, as opposed to what you're
Yeah.
being called to live like.
Yeah.
For anybody who's listening and anybody who's still struggling with erythrophobia and overcoming chronic blushing, what advice or words of encouragement or practical next steps or anything that you want to offer to them as advice, what would you say to them from this perspective that you're at now?
I was thinking about like this the other day, and I feel like if I could go back to my past self, just knowing that there's a solution, like just knowing that actually you can stop this, like you can live a life without blushing would be a huge comfort to me, because I think at the time I really thought that it's just who I am. It's never going to change. I mean, I guess in a sense it is part of your body, like, but I didn't think that I could ever be in a situation where it wouldn't happen. So I'd very much just I'd very much just say that there's a way. There are ways to get out of that. Um, and you don't have to be stuck in your cage. You can be free. So I don't know, I guess like for me, like I'm very much like a little bit of an ADHD. Like I don't have any specific path. I just kind of research and follow. And I'm sure a lot of people do that anyway, because you want to find a solution. Um, but I think anything to do with the nervous system, honestly, that's where to go. I think to focus, even like meditations and binaural beats, or like self-concept work, anything in that realm to change the nervous system and your beliefs about yourself and your worth is definitely the good place to start.
Yeah. I love that. I think it's so much about your nervous system. That's the one thing that I tapped into that I'm like, this is stemming from the nervous system.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is that we can tap into the nervous system and redirect the course and change our mind. Neuroplasticity is a real thing. We can
Yeah.
absolutely change our mind and we can change the outcomes by many other factors that we put into place. Thank you so much for spending time with me and thank you for sharing your story. Anytime I put somebody on blast, like, come, we talk to everybody. It's like, to me,
Yeah.
it's like the number one showing up and being able to be expansive and share your story with others because it just has this huge ripple effect on the impact that it has on others to hear not just me talking about it, but hearing others. And I think that one of the key takeaways in my life period in this journey has been when somebody I heard somebody say it was possible. And that's what I just heard you
Yeah.
say to the listeners is that it's possible. It's possible to
Yeah.
overcome this. It's possible to live a life outside of the cage and that we are the ones who hold the keys to that.
100%. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And it's such a nice thing to, I think when you know that it's possible, it gives you that feeling inside that you can literally anything, you can have anything, you can do anything that you want. So
Mm,
it helps you get through. Yeah.
so good. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you, April. Thanks for having me.
I hope you found this interview with Amanda incredibly insightful. I hope you were able to take something from it that just boosts you. As you could see on the video, when she made the comment about when we blush, we are pulling all of me into me. And instead of expanding that energy outward, I can't tell you that literally her sharing that with me changed my life. And that's the importance of sharing our story, is because your story could truly change somebody else's life. It's not that we're ever really creating anything new or saying anything new, but you might be having seeds planted over and over and over again. And then eventually somebody says something that just makes it click. The light bulb just goes off for you. And I am so grateful, even in collecting this information from Amanda to share with you, it literally transformed my life. So if you're interested in checking out more about Amanda, be sure to find her on Instagram in the link below. And be sure to subscribe and like this and comment. Let me know what was your greatest takeaway from my conversation with Amanda. And until next time, we'll see you in my next video. And you are so much more than redness. Rise and thrive.